which life and safety of civilians are threatened. Effective protection of civilians under armed conflict requires collaboration between the Council and other organs of the United Nations, such as the General Assembly and the ECOSOC Council. It is also important for the Council to collaborate with all relevant international organizations active in the field. Therefore, in closing, we would like to reiterate how this flexible and good amendment will help to solve this problem. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, delegates. Are you open to any points of information?
Any and all.
Are there any such in the House? Please raise your placard sign now. Seeing as there are none, we suggest you give the floor back to the chairs.
So we yield it.
Thank you. Are there any more delegates wishing to take the floor in favor of this amendment? China, please take the floor.
Honorable Chairs, dear delegate, we have gathered here today to discuss an issue of the utmost importance. China would like to remind the Security Council about its position in the conflicts of today. The issue of the protection of civilians in armed conflict involves political, peacekeeping, humanitarian, disarmament, legal, and many other dimensions. Because protecting innocent civilians is central to this committee's purpose, we completely support the motion handed in by the delegation of Italy. We urge the Council to do the same, as global cooperation is of great importance. Let us end the conflicts of today by encouraging cooperation between stable nations and the nations in trouble to ensure a prosperous and peaceful future.
Thank you, delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any at all.
Are there any such in the House? Please raise your placard sign now. UK, you've been recognized, followed by Syria.
The delegation of the UK was wondering what the delegation of China is thinking about the current Hong Kong conflicts regarding this amendment.
We would like to comment on that a little later in private, in a lobbying session.
Well, the delegation of Syria was wondering the exact same question, because does the delegation of China believe that handing over the control of Hong Kong back to the UK is a good thing?
We believe Hong Kong is a nation in severe trouble right now regarding the protests, and we believe that, let's call it, stimulation by a prosperous country such as the UK, can also be China, would increase prosperity and peace in the nation of Hong Kong today.
Granted.
The amendment specifically states foreign colonial power, which is the UK. So essentially, Hong Kong would be given back to the United Kingdom. And does the delegation of China agree with that?
The delegation of China would like to call upon the United Kingdom to discuss the matter of Hong Kong together as the neighboring country and the foreign, what did it say? The previously owned colonial territory. We encourage cooperation between the United Kingdom and the nation of China, the People's Republic of China.
Are there any more points of information in the House? Seeing as there are none, we suggest you give the floor to the chairs. Thank you. Are there any more delegations wishing to take the floor in favor of this amendment? Do I hear a motion to move into time against? We will now be moving to time against. Are there any delegations wishing to take the floor against this amendment? I can't see your name. Iraq, please take the floor.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, the delegation of Italy has proposed to protect civilians in armed conflicts by reintroducing colonialism in our eyes. We actually think that this resolution is not a step forward, but a step back. And And also the delegation of Germany said that most of these armed conflicts are due to instability in these countries. Well, we want to say that most of this instability in pre-colonial nations is due to the colonizers themselves, because they left in such a hurry that they didn't left in place a proper system of government, a proper system of trias politica, and a proper system of governance. Although we think it's very noble for the delegation of Italy that they want to take responsibility for actually taking on this thing, but we don't actually believe that by reintroducing colonialism this would be solved. Hiding this away between the noble wars of Italy to us is actually very, very disgraceful. Thank you.
Thank you, delegates. Are you open to any points of information?
Any at all?
Are there any such in the House? Please raise your placards high now. Italy.
First of all, they claim that our amendment is the reintroduction of colonialism in disguise. However, we must disagree with that, since we would like to refer the delegate to Appendix A, where it's specifically stated that the original delegates, so the ex-colonial territories, will retain a certain degree of autonomy. They still have the right to dictate over the political decision-making process. However, we, as the previous owners, so to say it, shall take the responsibility upon ourselves to ensure that these nations shall prosper as well, and we wish to do this by interfering where is needed with the political decision-making process. Of course, we do not plan to abuse this system. We merely wish to give these nations, these ex-colonial territories, since the delegation of Iraq has mentioned it themselves, we have left them while they were at their weakest points, which is the reason they have this unstable government. We want to take the responsibility upon ourselves to make this unstable government a stable government again. Furthermore, the delegation of Iraq speaks of the trias politica. However, we believe they have no right to speak of this, since they themselves...
Italy, would you please refer your statement as a question?
This is a right of reply, then we don't have to ask a question, right?
Is this the case?
Yeah.
Okay, the chair stands corrected. Go on.
Okay. And as a final note, the delegation of Iraq has also claimed that we use noble words in order to disguise our hidden intent. However, we can assure the delegate that we have no such thing, since we believe the delegate themselves is actually, using noble words themselves in order to paint a bad picture of the delegation of Italy, and we do not like this and enjoy this very much. We are quite disappointed in this act of the delegation of Iraq. Thank you.
I understand Italy's concern, but this is the same lie that the British and other countries have used after the First World War. When they made up the Treaty of Versailles, they said to their previous German colonies, we're only here to oversee your actions and soon you will be independent, while actually incorporating in their ex-colonies into their own colonial empire. This is the same lie told them over and over again, and we believe that it's time to put a stop to this.
Are you open to any more points of information?
2.
Are there any such in the House? Please raise your placards high now. UK, you've been recognized.
The delegation of Iraq mentions that they believe that countries that have previously been colonized should not be taken over again by the colonizers of those countries. However, does the delegate also mean that Hong Kong is better off under the hands of a corrupt country such as China than by the UK, being supported by the UK?
We actually believe that it's actually better to hand over a sovereign part of a country to the country of origin than to dedicate it to dedicate Hong Kong back to the UK, because the UK took this using military force, and we don't believe this is the right way to take it in the first place.
Request for follow-up?
Granted.
So the delegate is saying that even if the country of origin is a corrupt country that should be stopped and should seriously be spoken about in the Security Council, it is still better to hand over this part of the country back to it?
I don't think using the statement that a country is corrupt or not trustworthy is not acceptable, because then other countries could just take other port cities in other countries, just deciding, well, they're better off in their own country, so why should the other country have them? Well, they're clearly part of their country.
Are there any more points of information in the House? Japan, you've been recognized.
To expand a little bit on the UK's words and perhaps clear up some of your own, we were wondering whether the delegate thinks there might be a correlation between the stableness of a government and the amount of armed conflicts taking place in that region.
Could the delegate please rephrase his question?
Could the delegate please do so?
We were wondering if the delegate recognizes a certain correlation between the stableness of a government and the amount of armed conflicts in the region.
Yes, we believe if a country is left in an unstable state by a colonizer, for example, that the country is more prone to armed conflict than countries that are stable.
Request for follow-up.
Granted.
Does the delegate have any suggestion to help this problem?
We think that that the colonizers, after they left their own country, should have been better at putting in place the proper systems of governance instead of just leaving the country in a rump state that it has been left in our current world.
Request for follow-up.
This will be denied, sorry. Are there any more points of information in the House? Italy, you've been recognized.
To further build on the words of the delegation of Japan, they asked the delegates of whether they think there's a correlation between armed conflicts and the stability of a government. And then the delegation of Iraq responded that the colonizers should have taken the responsibility upon themselves to put in place a proper system. However, is it not exactly what this amendment will do?
No, because if the country that colonized in the first place took more time, for example in India, and dividing the country up into Pakistan and India, if they took more time in doing that and actually negotiating with the people themselves, it would have been better in the first place. And I think if we're now going to do, if the country is now left independent, and now after 50 years or so you're going to say, well, we didn't leave it in a good place, so we're going to go back, I don't think that's the right response to the situation.
We suggest we leave the vote in chairs. Thank you. Are there any more delegations wishing to take the floor against this amendment?
Motion to move into voting procedure.
Syria, do you want to take the floor against this amendment?
Yes.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, this amendment will impede the sovereignty of nations all around the world. This amendment will do more harm than good. Syria was once a colony of France, and though Syria has some problems, these problems will not be solved by handing the ropes back to France. Colonial powers have exploited millions of people all around the world, and do you really believe that by giving these European nations back the controls to, do you really believe that these European nations, giving back the controls to these European nations will solve any of the problems or just make them worse?
Thank you, delegates. Are you open to any points of information?
Two.
The delegate has opened itself to 2 points of information. Are there any such in the House? Please raise your placards high now. Italy, you've been recognized.
We were wondering why the delegate of Syria claims that sovereignty is more important than the safety of its own civilians. Is it not instead more important that we give these countries, that we give the reins of these countries in the hands of a government that is more responsible and more socio-economically stable in order to get rid of these problems and to ensure actual sovereignty?
So you believe the people of these nations will not rebel against these countries, creating more problems than there already are?
Request for a follow-up.
Granted.
We are quite stunned by the words of the Syrian delegates. for we believe that these countries already suffer from armed conflicts, so the civilians probably already have enough to rebel about against their own government, and we think they would probably enjoy it if a more stable government would take control. And we were wondering why the Syrian delegates thinks the way they do.
So, the delegate of Italy believes that, for example, in Vietnam, giving it back also to the French will not create any more problems. This is ridiculous.
Are there any more points of information in the House? Seeing as there are none, we suggest you yield the floor back to the chairs.
So we yield it.
Thank you. Are there any more delegations wishing to take the floor against this amendment? Iran, please take the floor.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, we as a delegation of Iran completely disagree with this amendment. We do not agree other countries interfering with our government, and we think this amendment will not solve all the armed conflicts in some regions, but instead will create new ones. Take for example Indonesia. It first was a rather peaceful country, but when the Netherlands interfered, there were a lot of armed conflicts because of this interference. So we believe no country should interfere. That is not the right amendment to solve the armed conflict problems. And we also believe that the people in these countries will not accept these interference by foreign countries. So this will create rebellions and new conflicts as well. And as the new owners of the country, or the people that will temporary make some decisions of the country, we believe that then the original government will not matter as much as the new country, and we believe this is not true. This is not the right way to do this. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
One.
Is there any such in the House? Please raise your placards high now. Any other than Italy? Italy, you've been recognized.
We have a couple of questions to the delegates of Iran. First of all, the delegate claimed that this amendment shall create new armed conflicts in regions that already suffer from armed conflicts. And as an argument, they gave the example of Indonesia, which was quite peaceful before the Dutch came. However, this seems weird to us because the delegate has phrased this in such a way that they believe this is a reinstatement of colonialism. But it seems to us the delegate has instead missed the entire point of this amendment, because this is not a reinstatement, rather an aid to these countries. After all, the name FAP, Foreign Assistance Program. And so our question is, how does the delegate believe new armed conflicts will be created by this amendment?
Because we believe that the assistance will be more than just assistance, and there will be a lot of decisions made based on the new countries, and we think that the people in the country will not agree with this interference.
We suggest you the floor to the chairs. Thank you. Do I hear a motion to move into voting procedure? We will now be moving to voting procedure. Note passing is suspended. Admin staff, please take voting positions. All delegates wishing to vote in favor of this amendment, please raise your placards high now. All delegates wishing to vote against this amendment, please raise your placards high now. With a majority, this amendment has passed. Clapping is in order. Rise and state your point.
We would like to remind all delegates that since this amendment has passed and since amendments immediately go into effect after passing, now all ex-colonial territories are in the hands of the previous delegates again. So therefore we as Italy are in control of the Libyan delegates and a part of China, a very small part, to the north. Thank you.
There's no
I have no opinion anymore.
Ja, dass er jetzt dass die alten Kolonialmächte wieder von den anderen kontrolliert werden. Das heißt, er hat jetzt Kontrolle über, weiß ich gar nicht wen. Soll man sagen, dass das in den Lobbytime geklärt werden kann? Order in the House, please. Order in the House, please. The effects of this amendment can be clarified in the lobbying time between the two delegates. We will now be entertaining an amendment handed in by the United States of America. United States, please take the floor and read out your amendment.
Suggest to send US troops into crisis areas like Iraq or Syria to safeguard them and then afterwards ameliorate the infrastructure to allow the government to protect the civilians on their own. We believe that this amendment is a good idea as many developing countries suffer from an unstable government. Therefore we think in a country like the USA with a big influence could help to stabilize the situation there and therefore save the human rights or protect them.
Thank you, delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
No.
The delegate
The
has
floor is
not
yours.
open self-tape information. So we suggest you give the floor to the chairs. Thank you. Are there any delegations wishing to take the floor in favor of this amendment? So please raise your placards high. Rise and state your point. Yes. This is in Ordnung. Zoom doch generell drin, oder? That's better. So again, are there any delegations wishing to take the floor in favor of this amendment? Rise and state your point. Rise and state your point. Thank you. So, das ist ein Stück runtergerutscht. So. Again, are there any delegations wishing to take the floor in favor of this amendment? Please raise your placards high. Are there any delegations wishing to take the floor against this amendment? Please raise your placards high. India, please take the floor. Please take the floor.
We were very heavily questioning the intent of this amendment as it suggests US troops into crisis areas like Iraq or Syria. We would like to ask the delegate of the United States why specifically these countries. As we see, there are also many other countries that have severe problems. So yes, is there any reason for the delegates of the United States to choose to help these countries?
Should I stand up?
Please.
So, like Iraq and Syria are just two of many countries that need help, but we thought we could start with these two countries and improve them, and then move on to other countries that might need the help of the USA.
Are there any points of information in the House? Seeing as there are none, Russian Federation, you've been recognized.
Is the delegation of India aware of the fact that Iraq and Syria are meant to be just examples, and if there are any other countries for the delegation of India that they want to have mentioned specifically, they would have had the opportunity to mention them earlier, and therefore there's no reason to criticize these two countries being an example?
We were not aware of that.
We would like to remind all delegates that it is possible to hand in amendments to the second degree if necessary. Are there any more points of information in the House? Seeing as there are none, we suggest you yield the floor back to the chairs. You okay? Rise and state your point.
We would like to ask the delegation of the USA whether we could change as a friendly amendment like into areas such as but not limited to.
Is this in order?
Granted, yes.
Granted, okay. Zero. Okay. Since this is a friendly amendment, we are still into time against this amendment. Are there any delegates wishing to take the floor against? Syria, you've been recognized. Please take the floor.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, as the delegation of Syria, we were wondering why only US troops and not a United Nations peace force, because it seems a bit suspicious. And at the moment there are already a lot of US troops, and this is a decision taken by the USA themselves, not a decision for the United Nations. And we believe that sending troops into a nation is not always the solution. We should look at more economic or social solutions instead of just brute force.
Thank you, delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Two.
The delegate has opened himself to 2 points of information. Are there any such in the House? Please raise your placards high now. Seeing as there are none, we suggest you yield the floor back to the chairs.
So we do.
Are there any more delegations wishing to take the floor against this amendment? Iran, please take the floor. Das sollte reichen. Das nächste Jahrhundert.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, we are extremely shocked by this amendment. It states that the US troops are made to protect the civilians which into crisis areas. We do not see protecting civilians. We do not see drone attacks to kill our great leader Soleimani as protecting our civilians. This is disgusting to even make this amendment and state to protect the civilians while you're actually murdering such a great leader. Thank you.
Thank you, delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any at all except the United States of America.
Are there any such in the House? Please raise your placards high now. Seeing as there are none, we suggest you yield the floor back to the chairs.
So yielded.
Thank you. Are there any more delegations wishing to take the floor against this amendment? Please raise your placards high. We will now be moving to voting procedure. Note passing is suspended. Admin staff, please take voting positions. All delegates wishing to vote in favor of this amendment, please raise your placards high now. In favor. Please raise your placards high and clearly. Thank you. All delegates wishing to vote against. Okay. With an overwhelming majority, this amendment has not passed. Clapping is not in order. Okay, so kurz erzählen und Pause nach den amendments. Since we are still waiting for more amendments to be handed in, we will conduct a 10-minute break. fehlt? Egal. Es sind genug da.
Sag schon mal eine Strafe.
Ja. Okay, those missing will be punished later. A little comment to the amendment passed earlier, since it is a little difficult to establish in all committees. This will only apply to the continent of Oceania, which means that Tahiti and the islands around Tahiti are going to France. And that's it.
Motion to appeal the decision made by the chair. If a two-thirds majority votes in favor,
Denied. This will be denied. We again would like to remind all delegates to put notes into the gossip box, and we would like to remind the P5 members that they have the power to veto decisions. Okay. Oh. We are still waiting for amendments. Perfect. Ich kann ein Foto machen, da kann ich das schon mal vorlesen. We would like to call upon the delegation of France to read out their amendments. Do you have it on your block or?
No.
No, okay, give me a second.
Asks all parties to avoid using explosive weapons with a wide impact area in populated places, as they lead to civilian death or injury, together with damage to critical infrastructure such as healthcare, water, and electricity. The delegation of France wants to underline the necessity of such an amendment, especially regarding the decision of US President Donald Trump from last Friday, who has lifted restrictions on the deployment of anti-personnel landmines by American forces, who are especially dangerous for civilians.
Thank you, delegates. Are you open to any points of information?
Yes, one.
The delegate has opened himself to one point of information. Are there any such in the House? Please raise your placards high now. Yeah. Ah, ja, sure. Ich kann es nicht sehen. Oder? Doch, doch. Okay, no. Okay. Again, are there any delegations wishing to make a point of information? Yes? Iran, you've been recognized.
Our delegation in France planning to do this because we think that if people want, if certain countries want to drop bombs, they will just do it.
Yeah. Do I have to answer?
No, you could say that you don't want to answer.
I don't want to answer that.
We suggest you to
Yeah, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Are there any delegations wishing to take the floor in favor of this amendment handed in by France? Please raise your placards high now.
Motion to move into time against.
Any objections? Then we'll be moving to time against. Are there any delegations wishing to take the floor against this amendment? Please raise your placards high. UK, please take the floor.
We as the delegation of the honorable chairs, dear delegates, we as the delegation of the UK believe that this is not a bad amendment. However, it just doesn't, it will not be implemented in the right way. As a delegation of, we believe of Iran already mentioned, how will the UN prevent countries from dropping bombs? Because if they want to, they will. Another thing that we don't like about this amendment is that it doesn't come with a solution to what to do when not dropping bombs. Therefore, we think this amendment is in nature not bad, however, it is not clear enough, and we think that something else will be more suiting for this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any and all.
Are there any such in the House? Please raise your placards high now. Russian Federation, you've been recognized.
Does the delegation of UK believe that it may be possible to, as a consequence of not following this point, to apply some, thanks, to apply penalties, for example, raising the export prices of countries who didn't follow this point?
We think that the delegation of
Russian Federation.
of Russia is making a good point. However, we also believe that countries who do drop bombs on other countries in which also innocent civilians will be killed are not really countries who factor in the consequences of their decisions. Therefore, we think that they will simply not take this into account when making the decision to drop a bomb, for example, and we still think that it will not be actually useful.
Are there any more points of information in the House? Please raise your placards high. Seeing as there are none, we suggest you yield the floor to the chairs.
So yielded.
Are there any more delegations wishing to take the floor against this amendment? Please raise your placards high. Germany, please take the floor.
Honorable Chair, dear delegates, although we recognize the good nature of this amendment, we don't think that implementing this amendment will solve anything, because it won't prevent countries from producing neither using these bombs. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any and all.
Are there any such in the House? Please raise your placards high. Seeing as there are none, we suggest you give the floor
So
to the
we
chairs. Are there any more United States?
Question
Rise and state your point.
if one of
Rise and state your point. Thank you.
if one of the P5 countries wants to use its veto right, when can it use it? After the whole resolution or for each?
The P5 members are able to veto a resolution after the voting procedure, after the votes were counted, yes. And after the resolution as a whole, since we're going to vote on this after it's ready again. Are there any more delegations wishing to take the floor against this amendment? Iran, you've been recognized.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, we understand the point the delegation front is trying to make. We just don't think the amendment is correct because it states that explosive weapons with a wide impact area, that these weapons should be avoided, but this means that when explosive weapons with a small impact area can still be used, and we find that a bit vague and yeah, thank you.
Thank you, delegates. Are you open to any points of information?
No.
So we suggest we give the floor back to the
So
chairs.
yielded.
Thank you. Are there any more delegations wishing to take the floor against this amendment? Please raise your placards high. Syria, please take the floor.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, this amendment will not solve anything. It says asks all parties to avoid using explosive weapons, but it says avoid, so if they want to, they can still do it, so it really doesn't do anything.
Thank you, delegates. Are you open to any points of information?
None.
So we suggest you give the floor back to the chairs. We would like to remind all delegates that it is possible to hand in amendments to the second degree in order to specify or replace certain parts of an amendment. Are there any more delegations wishing to take the floor against this amendment? We will now be moving into voting procedure. Note passing is suspended. Admin staff, please take voting positions. All delegates wishing to vote in favor of this amendment, please raise your placards high now. You may lower your placards. All delegates wishing to vote against this amendment, please raise your placards high now. With an overwhelming majority, this amendment has not passed. Clapping is not in order. Again, we are waiting for more amendments to be handed in. France could also re-specify its amendment and re-impose it. Ich glaube, das zweite Thema wird dann ein bisschen spannender. Willst du nochmal tauschen? Ja, alles gut. Ich gehe mal nach der Pause. Ja. Intercommittee not passing. Aber er hat doch noch nichts abgegeben, oder? Hat er schon was losgeschickt? Nee, er hat noch nichts geschickt, aber es kam schon 2 von woanders an, aber er hat noch nichts rausgeschickt. Aber ich frage, wo die andere Admin ist. Achso, ja, das war gar nicht. Vielleicht steht die gerade irgendwo anders. Ja, gut. Dann bleibt es weiter bei dem, was wir bis jetzt haben. Ja, das ist gar nicht mal so viel. Aber noch kein Veto. Die Frage ist aber, es wird auch an keinem Blatt gearbeitet. Nee, wenn er schreibt und er schreibt. Okay. Jetzt fragt ihr. Are any delegations planning to hand in amendments? Yes? Yes. Okay. Rise and state your point.
Yeah, thank you.
Hast du nochmal Wasser? Ja. Ah, das kann ich mal noch. Ich weiß auch nicht, ne? Das reicht nicht für beide Tage. Das reicht nicht für viel Zelt. Welches Komitee?
Ich fordere Zoe auf, dass sie sich melden soll.
Okay.
Wie schreibe ich das? Wie ist es nochmal mit dem Kontrollieren? Müssen wir die nicht kontrollieren, wenn die rausgehen?
Ja, eigentlich schon.
Ja, machen wir
Gut,
nächstes Mal.
nächstes Mal.
Das wird nämlich sicherlich nicht nur der letzte Versuch sein.
Das war falsch formuliert.
Lass ihn doch laufen, wenn er laufen.
Einfach sich unsicher.
Achso, na gut dann.
Danke. Wortwörtlich. Sehr erst mit Trumps Rede. Wie wir schon gesagt haben, es gibt da keine Änderungen im bereits stehenden. Ja. Können wir dem als Information. Oder kannst du ja nach vorne rufen? Ja. Italy, please approach the chairs. Please approach the chairs. Since we've already specified the amendment and it has already passed, we cannot amend another amendment.
Can we appeal your decision then? And if it two-thirds
It is really too difficult now to establish this in all committees, and yeah, I think that it would be not the best for those delegates which this thing applies to for the conference, so I'm sorry.
Okay. Could we perhaps only use this amendment if it is applicable? For example, if a situation arises where this amendment can be made use of, it is then applicable in the Security Council.
We will think about that if such a situation arises.
Okay, thank you.
Ich sag mal was zu dem Intercommittee-Ding. damit ihr es wisst. Sehr gut. Yeah. We would like to remind all delegates that all notes referring to the inter-committee notes are going to be checked by the chairs before they are transported into another committee. Rise and state your point. Yes. Das braucht ihr nicht, ne? Ne, ist okay. Jetzt hat kein Trotzdem schon vorgestellt werden. Jetzt hat kein Trotzdem schon vorgestellt werden. Ja, ja, klar. Ja, deswegen. Ja, kannst du ihn rufen. Okay. We would like to call upon the delegation of Egypt to read out their amendment. Jetzt gehen wir durchnummerieren die Amendments. Yeah, over there, yes. Thank you. Perfekt. Sehr gut.
Strongly suggests all UN members to join the Kigali Principles on the protection of civilians in order to improve peacekeeping operations. Honorable chairs, dear delegates, as the delegation of Egypt, a country that has been plagued by civil wars and warfare and harms to all civilians, we realize the importance of protecting the civilians not only in our country but in every country that is in conflict. This is why we strongly suggest all other UN member states to join the Kigali Principles, which is a non-binding set of 18 pledges in order to improve the quality and thoroughness of the peacekeeping operations in conflict zones. These principles have been signed by several countries, under which Italy, Rwanda, Uruguay, the Netherlands, Uganda, and more. We would like to suggest all countries to sign the principles in order to improve not only the quality of the peacekeeping operations with rules such as not limited to training the peacekeeping forces prior to sending them out, preventing the danger before it happens, and also regularly checking up on the quality of the peacekeeping operations and recalling the troops when peace is not maintained. Thank you.
Thank you, delegates. Are you open to any points of information?
Any at all.
Are there any such in the House? Please raise your placards high now. Seeing as there are none, we suggest you yield the floor back to the chairs. Are there any delegations wishing to take the floor in favor of this amendment? Please raise your placards high. Do I hear a motion to move into time against? Rise and state your point.
Could we have some more time to look at the amendment and think about it?
Yes, of course. Wollen wir jetzt gerade mal die Kali Principles? Yes.
The delegation of Italy is going to speak in favor of this amendment, however, he is not here at the moment.
Okay, we will display the Kali Principles in a moment, so everybody can take a look at it. Na super. Ich glaube, wir können nur den. Egypt, may you please approach to the chairs. Because we cannot find a clear list of the Kali principles, could you explain a little further?
Yeah, I have
you have a list?
the direct.
Yes. Yeah, that's okay.
If I am allowed to look
Yeah.
up, I know which side to find them. So I just looked up principles on protection of civilians, and then it gives a list to this side where I no, never mind, this is the wrong one. Yeah, so here it lists all 18 pledges.
18.
Maar het is mosterd.
Yes.
Yeah.
Gut. Wie viel Zeit nehmen wir denn für? 10 Minuten? Ja, 10 Minuten. So, die sind noch nicht sichtbar. Der Guy hat trotzdem. Ja. These are the Kigali principles. We will set reading time for these for 10 minutes. From legal. Ist der Livestream vorbei? UAE, das muss ich. Nein. Kann der nicht lesen, Idiot. Magst du das nicht schön liegen? Das kommt doch von. UAE. Achso. Das merkst du das? Ja. Achso, wir können die Schrift erkennen, klar. Ja, ich wusste es auch so. So eine Kacke, die sowas einzurechnen. Aber egal, jetzt habe ich Zeit abzuschreiben. Weißt du, wann wir Mittagessen haben? Weißt du, wann wir Mittagessen haben? Ja. Ich kann nachgucken. Um 12:35 Uhr. Okay. 30 Minuten. Ja, so nice. Ja. Kann, wenn wir Glück haben, dann geht nur das fertig. Wenn wir Pech haben, dann gehen wir ein bisschen mehr als nur das fertig. Ja, mal gucken. Links. United States of America, rise and state your point.
I want the delegation of the USA wants to rephrase one of the amendments or like add something to this amendment. What should I?
To the current amendment of Egypt.
No, I mean to one of these following.
Achso, wow.
To number
Warte mal,
5.
das geht nicht, weil das ist Sunshine. Das ist since we don't have the time to amend these clauses, and we are not empowered to amend, since this is not amendments of the UN Charter, we cannot amend the Cali principles.
Okay, thanks.
Achso, ich weiß nicht, von wem sind die aufgestellt, weiß ich nicht, aber nicht von der UN. Dann wissen wir Bescheid. Ist kurz runter.
Point of information to the chairs.
Rise and state your point.
Isn't this supposed to be in the preambulatory part of the resolution, as it will recognize previously made like views and rules?
Well, since these principles are not recognized by all UN member states, we have to vote on this.
They are principles and they do not actually implement anything. So is it voting on the recognition of the principles?
It is voting on the amendment stating that it suggests all members to recognize and follow the principles.
If it only suggests, then like it doesn't really do
Yeah,
anything
but
operative.
viele suggesting of us. Yeah, a lot of amendments only suggest something.
Yeah.
It's not uncommon. But you could propose a friendly amendment if you want to, or an amendment to the second degree. Zu viel darauf vorbereitet. Reading time on the Kali principles elapsed. We are now moving to time in favor of this amendment. Are there any delegations wishing to take the floor in favor of this amendment? Please raise your placards high. UK, please take the floor.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, esteemed guests, we as the delegation of the UK believe this is a simple amendment that we should all vote in favor of, as it strongly suggests that the members of the UN will recognize these principles. These principles are quite common, and we think they will not harm any state in any way. Thus, we should not debate for too long about it, as we believe it's quite necessary and useful for the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, delegate. Are there any delegations which are you open to any points of information?
Any and all.
Are there any such in the House? Please raise your placards high now. Seeing as there are none, we suggest you leave the floor with the chairs. Are there any more delegations wishing to take the floor in favor of this amendment? Please raise your placards high. Do I hear a motion to move to time against? We are now moving to time against this amendment. Are there any delegations wishing to take the floor against this amendment? We will now be moving to voting procedure. Note passing is suspended. Admin staff, please take voting positions. All delegations wishing to vote in favor of this amendment, please raise your placards high now. You may lower your placards. All delegates wishing to vote against this amendment, please raise your placards high now. With an overwhelming majority, this amendment has passed. Clapping is in order. Egal. Dann wechseln wir jetzt. Confederation. We will now be entertaining an amendment handed in by the Russian Federation. Please read out your amendment.
The Russian Federation suggests to stabilize weakened nations by investing in already existing organizations who want to develop a reliable water source and enhancing infrastructure and providing medical treatments to people who are injured in such areas. And also, as B says, deploying, actually not developing, deploying. So we suggest that we also deploy UN troops just to make sure that civilians aren't going to be victims of how to say, just to assure their safety. And also, since the UN doesn't have as many troops and it's already quite overwhelmed by the amount of conflicts we have, we offer to deploy some of our troops as well if such are needed.
Thank you, delegates. Are you open to any points of information?
Two.
The delegate has opened himself to 2 points of information. Are there any such in the House? Please raise your placards high now. United States of America, followed by the UK, followed by... only 2, yeah.
Why do the Russian Federation want to just send their troops for save the civilians and not any other troops from any other countries?
That's because the delegation of Russia is not capable of forcing other countries to deploy their troops. And it's only a suggestion. Like we say that if need, we would offer. And if you want to do so too, you may do so.
To elaborate on what the delegation of the USA just said, the delegation of the Russian Federation mentioned that they would, if needed, supply troops of their own, but how did the other member states of the UN know that these troops will be fighting in favor of the UN and not in favor of Russia?
That's a very good question, actually. The delegation of Russia doesn't believe that there is a way to guarantee this, but we can promise. So you can take our word for it that we.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we suggest you yield the floor back to the chairs.
Floor is yielded.
Thank you.
Motion, point of information to the House.
Rise and state your point.
We would wish to remind our delegates that this amendment is completely useless. Allow us to explain why. First of all, point A, investing in existing organizations developing a reliable water source, etc., has already been accepted in UN Resolution 1673 that has passed back in 2006. Furthermore, point B, deploying UN troops to assure the safety of civilians. That's why the UNDPO exists, the United Nations Department of Peace Operations, and reiterating that the deployal of UN troops will assure the safety of the civilians seems to us as yet another already passed amendment. So therefore we would like to propose as a friendly amendment to scrap point A and B, leaving suggest to stabilize a weakened nation.
You may sit down. Rise and state your point. Wait a moment, just a moment, please.
Wir haben gar nicht so viele Sitze hier.
You may continue.
So points of previous resolutions which have passed. still do apply after the new resolution is concluded? Like,
Yes.
okay, then it's granted.
Okay. Sorry, genau. We have received an amendment to the second degree without any country name on it. Who is the submitter? Ah.
But seeing as the delegation of Italy pointed out some new information for the delegation of Syria, it has no point anymore.
Okay. Good. We are in motion to time against this amendment. Are there any delegations wishing to take the floor against this amendment? Please raise your placards high. We will now be moving to voting procedure. Note passing is suspended. Admin staff, please take voting positions. Rise and state your point.
Is the clause going to be edited?
If it is a friendly amendment?
And it was.
It was, okay. Please approach the chairs. What's the exact change applied to the amendment?
Points A and B already are applied in previous resolutions, so they are basically not needed.
Okay, striking both of them.
Yeah, but like the suggested part.
So
that's like the only necessary part, basically. Yeah.
Nations, countries by deploying Russian nations.
Yeah, and that would be.
You are still.
That's still.
Okay, like this. Okay. Okay, dann sind wir wieder in time in favor, ne? Okay, we're now again in time in favor of this amendment. Are there any delegations wishing to take the floor in favor of this amendment? Please raise your placards high. UK, please take the floor.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, esteemed guests. We as the delegation of the UK think it's a good idea to stabilize weakened nations. We wanted to speak in favor of this amendment as we do realize it is not yet complete, and we as the Security Council should think of some more examples that we would like to add to it. However, we really wanted to point out that the idea behind this amendment is good and we hope to make it even better.
Thank you, delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
And you know.
Are there any such in the house? Please raise your placards high. India, you've been recognized.
I'd like to say to the delegates of the United Kingdom that we are currently working on an amendment that will hopefully sort of also like further enhance this or by stabilizing weakened nations.
Is it an amendment to the second degree?
No.
Okay.
We do not see where the question is posed, but we are happy to hear.
Are there any more points of information in the house? Seeing as there are none, we suggest you yield the floor back to the chairs. Thank you. Are there any more delegations wishing to take the floor in favor of this amendment? Then we'll be moving to time against. Are there any delegations wishing to take the floor against this amendment? This amendment? Please raise your placards high. United States of America, please take the floor.
The United States of America does think that this is a good amendment. However, it would be better if it would be not just Russian troops who would send into these areas, but more other troops if needed.
You could apply this as an amendment to the second
Yeah,
degree.
I forgot it.
Okay, do you still want to?
Yes.
Okay. Will this be accepted as a friendly amendment? Not. Okay. Then, okay. United States, please hand in your amendments. Please hand in the amendment stating the changes you want to apply. Please approach the chairs.
Point of information for the chairs.
rise and state your point.
We were wondering whether since the UN blah 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 part is still relevant to the amendment, as it was further elaborating on clauses, on parts of the amendment that we previously scrapped. Because we spoke in favor of the one sentence, like not the rest.
That is true. Okay, so this will be struck.
Dat is wichtig.
Yeah. Well, since this amendment is quite pointless now, we would suggest all delegates to hand in amendments to the second degree. Now, please. Yeah? What? Yeah, sure, sure. Here are some amendment sheets if you need to.
So gut angefangen, also. Tschüss. Jetzt weniger.
Gute Füße, die aufpassen. Das ist lustig. Rise and state your point.
Wir haben 15 Minuten Pause.
Is it
Can I use the
priority?
bathroom? Russian troops. And I would just give you
State your point.
Can I use the bathroom?
You may.
Well, thank you.
Motion to move in the voting procedure.
Second. Denied, since we are still waiting for amendments to be handed in to the second degree. So. Are there any delegations planning to hand in amendments to the second degree? Okay. Gut. Oh, wir haben schon eine 15 Minuten Pause. So, 10 Minuten mal noch was ein paar Sachen sagen. Die Pause geht von 12:15, nee, von 12:35 bis 13:05. Das ist lustig. Das ist natürlich mega. Ist euch langweilig? Danke. Scheiß schon wieder.
Ja, das ist aber nicht mal.
Das ist kein Second Degree Amendment.
Ja, genau. Kannst du ja mal herrufen dann gleich.
Ja, das ja. Von wem kann das jetzt? United States, ne? United States, please approach the chairs. It is a amendment to the second degree, so you have to add something or strike something.
To the
It
actual
doesn't
amendment.
state add or strike or combine.
Yeah, this was like I would to stabilize the weakened
If,
nations.
okay, and then you will add.
Okay. Okay, thank you. You may see.
Das war dunkelrot, ne? To send their troops to help protect civilians and therefore the human rights. Okay. Order in the House, please. The United States may please read out its amendment to the second degree. Yes.
Amendment to the second degree suggests to stabilize weak nations if the UN is overworked with other issues. The US offers to send their troops to help protecting civilians and therefore the human rights.
Thank you, Delegate.
Welcome.
Are you open to any points of information?
I am.
Sorry?
Yes.
Yes. Are there any delegations willing to make points of information? Russian Federation, you've been recognized.
Is a delegation of the United States aware of the fact that most likely it's very likely that this clause is not going to pass, since UN troops would most likely not be accepted in those areas where they could be needed, since in most cases it's actually the US troops that would have to be held back, since like most of the US troops are the cause of the problem. So it wouldn't make sense sending your own troops to stop your troops.
The US is never the problem, it's more the only nation that helps. We are just, we have a helping function and we never cause any problems.
Are there any more points of information in the House? Please raise your placards high now. UK, you've been recognized.
As the delegation of the USA has the tendency to interfere with sovereign nations, how does the House know that they will not do this again, and this is not merely an excuse to put their troops into areas of conflict?
We are not working against any countries, we're just trying to help and improve their infrastructure and primarily help save the life of the civilians, and therefore we don't have any bad intentions.
Are there any more points in the House? Russian Federation?
Delegation of the USA, would they agree to, instead of deploying US troops, increasing the number of US soldiers in the troops of the UN? So instead of being US troops, they would act under the UN?
No.
Request to follow up.
Denied, sorry.
Thank you.
So you the floor.
The floor yielded.
Thank you. We are now in time in favor of this amendment to the second degree. Are there any delegations wishing to... Sorry? Do I hear any objections? We will now be moving our time against this amendment to the second degree. Are there any delegations wishing to take the floor? Iran, please take the floor.
Honorable Chair, dear delegates, we, the delegation of Iran, again think this amendment it has been made before, and for a reason it didn't pass. Do we have to remind the name Soleimani again? Do we have to remind that protecting civilians is not murdering someone by drones? We think the US is not the right country to protect the civilians.
Thank you, delegates. Are you open to any points of information?
Any at all except for the United States.
Are there any such in the House? Please raise your placards high. UK, you've been recognized.
If we are correct, Iran saying that just because the delegation of the USA made a mistake once, they're now not entitled to protect anyone at all? Because we think that would be quite like untrue.
We think the United States has made previous mistakes in the past as well, so and we distrust them a lot.
Request for follow-up?
This will be denied since we have lunch break in 5 minutes. And we will continue with this debate after lunch.
Like you say something and tell the name of my country, am I not allowed to?
Yes, you may. But we'll continue after lunch. Yeah, the break goes until 13:05, so we're gonna meet here at 13:10. Any delegations not present will be punished. You need your stickers as a card for the meal. And there are 2 meals with meat and without. Yes. That's it, okay. Gut, gut. Sind immer noch, wir haben noch nicht abgestimmt, ne? Nee, haben wir noch nicht.